Penford, just to execute its growth strategies, continues to be a strong, viable community or company within this community. The community gains jobs, it increases its tax base, it gets a new park at no cost to the citizens. In addition, we're taking into consideration with the new project all the aesthetics so that we blend in with the surrounding community. And we're working to be in alignment with the Vision Cedar Rapids point. Again, big points: jobs, tax base, new amenities, skate park, ball field, playground, at no cost to the citizens of Cedar Rapids. We'll move into questions and answers because you guys are probably bored of hearing me speak up here and have some questions. Again, as a reminder, the intent of this evening, is one, I wanted to present the proposal so that you could have questions that maybe you came in here already answered. If not, it's an opportunity to ask those questions. I want the community informed with what is going on so that you can take that information and you can form your own opinions as, again, is it a good thing or a bad thing for Cedar Rapids? The opportunity to express your opinions is at the upcoming City Council meetings where they're going to be asking for public input. So with that, we'll move to a quick question and answer session. Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Last night I went and I asked a question about what we could compare the odor to, and so when I was walking in tonight, I don't know if the wind was going the same direction when other people were, but there was a smell in the air, and I think that's a Penford smell. I can't always identify them in the city, but I'm wondering, is that what would be called a sweet agricultural smell, or is that different from what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I think if you're walking in tonight and you're getting a smell, where it's coming from, I don't know. Don't even know which way the wind's blowing, but we're 3 miles that way. I think you'd want to go around the Penford facility and make your assessment. Again, when I think of odor and framing it out to the community, what you smell today from Penford is what it's going to be more than likely in the future. Now, I'm being pretty cautious with that statement because, again, I showed you a chart of declining emissions and increasing. One part of that is because of increased technology. That will continue to improve on the odor of Penford. For those who have been around for a number of years here in Cedar Rapids, I think it's safe to say that the downtown manufacturing has become less odor within this community.
Maybe this is just rumor mill going around, but I do kind of remember conversations a few years ago that the Penford company with the city councilor folks with city staff had regarding flood protection of your property, and there was regarding acquisition of the park, and that Penford acquired that Riverside Park, that Penford would pick up the tab for flood protection adjacent to the park and adjacent to your facility. Is that still on the table, or is that something that was rumor mill?
Well, I'll say it's something that's rumor mill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jim, I didn't ask this Monday night, I was at the meeting, but could you introduce your staff that's here and just their role that works with you? I think it'd be helpful to understand who's all here from Penford.
It's going to take me 15 minutes to do that. Is there something specific you want to know?
I'm just kind of curious who's all part of this presentation besides you, when it's supporting you.
I can stand up.
If they just stand up perhaps, then just be curious to know.
I mean, do you just want a number, John? What's your...
I'd love to, if they Penford just stand up, that would be great. I'd love to know who's here from Penford. Great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a plan of where you're going to relocate the skate park?
The question is there a plan where we're going to relocate the skate park? That is a decision that will be made within the city. In my conversation with Julie Sina, they are looking at locations on both sides of the river, and they want to keep the amenities in the downtown area.
Is it possible to do 2 skate parks?
Good question. Is it possible to do 2 skate parks? The reality is, more than likely, there will be 2 skate parks. Because, as I said, I don't have a project. We intend to leave Riverside Park, the city in Penford, as Riverside Park until there is a project. But once there's an agreement, if we're successful, we got to begin putting in a second skate park, which is under Penford's, finance. So it could be a period of time where there's 2.
Could you switch one of those, like the ballpark, for another skate park? I mean, could it possibly be 2 skate parks instead of a
I see the question.
ballpark? And
that's something that you may want to talk with the Parks and Rec on.
Okay.
That's not my decision of how they do that.
Okay.
Ask please. Yes, sir.
Have you looked into what steps would be on the property that are close to where you're going to be really next to the same property? I live right across the street from the property you're looking for the same, and I can see my property value going down. The park that might take spring is material, and moving several miles away, and the affordability of the value down.
So the question is, have we looked at the effects of residential property other than the 9 that we talked about in the presentation?
Well, even with them, if they decide they don't want to sell the lady, spoken with the neighbor across the street, we do the houses.
Yep.
And she doesn't want to move. And if she chooses not to, how's that going to affect her property if you guys do not about that?
So the question is, how is that going to affect her property? I mean, I'm not qualified to say what's it going to do to property values. They're not a
Well, they're saying it's at no cost to the city, the things that they're looking at doing, and if somebody lives there, that's a cost to me. I'm losing value in my home, I'm losing stability in my home. That's affecting me.
Again, I don't know what the change will be to real estate. I'm not a real estate person. Now, the 9 homes that are adjacent, because they're directly either the backyard we think is a good neighbor, the right thing to do is to approach them and say, would you consider moving? We'll offer a fair price for your home. If they say no, that's their choice and right.
So I understand the multiplier effect of jobs and to build the buildings and things like that with the Iowa State study. Is that a net effect? So does that include the externalities of the emissions and what that does to job growth, or is that strictly the positive side?
I guess I'm not sure how to understand your question.
So emissions in any town cost jobs at times, right? So is that study done solely for what it's going to improve, or is it net? So in other words, is it taking the plus and minuses and combining them and saying it's times 7, or is that just one side of things?
I don't know the answer to that in the study.
On that,
I'm not sure what the...
Which study are you referring to by Dave Swinton and Iowa State? Because I Googled him and I come up with about 24 or more different studies he's written since 2000 about corn wet milling in Iowa. And I get conflicting answers from his papers as to what the number actually is.
I can get that to you, John. I don't have the date.
In regards to the 9 homes that are along the park, these homes were not nearly as flooded as a lot of other ones in that area because of the elevation there. And the majority of the 9 have been fully restored since the flood. Would Penford be open to possibilities with the city and other interested parties in getting some of those houses moved to vacant lots where houses have been demolished on 2nd Street, K Street, 3rd Street, within a block or 2 of the Penford site to help continue the process of reseeding that neighborhood?
Yeah, and in fact, it's a good question if you didn't hear. Would Penford be interested, if we were successful in acquiring the properties, instead of tearing them down, could we physically move them? In fact, we've had a discussion with one of the residents about that. One of the residents really enjoys her home. Yeah. There's, unfortunately, for flood reasons, available property.
What have been the concerns raised by City Council, and how do you address those?
Trying to think of the concerns by City Council.
Or issues, what issues have they brought as you've been negotiating early before December on this? what initially has been brought to Penford as concerns from the council as to your acquisition of this, and how has Penford addressed those with the council?
So John's question is, what concerns have been brought by council? From a process perspective, I've met with both city council and staff. So in city council, I talked about really very similar to the presentation that is here today. Why do we want the property? What is the benefit to the community? I don't know that there was a lot of feedback within, the meetings with individual council members. Questions of...
You use the term odors. I would call them aromas rather than that. In reference to the emissions here, I don't know what that could be referring to, because I've always lived in my almost a little over 80 years in the southwest area. Right now, 3 blocks as the crow flies from the Penford plant. Before that, maybe another 3 blocks, 6 blocks away. And back in the good old days, when you went by before they tore down the 5-story plant where the trucks are unloaded now, if you went by there and you didn't want to breathe because the smell was so acrid it burned your nostrils, that's gone. If there is an aroma, it disappears within a few minutes, because the olfactory senses are the first to go, to quiet down, if you want to call it that. And you don't see that aroma, you don't smell that aroma for 5 or 10 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. What I do smell, and there are no emissions, nothing comes down out of the air and to mar your clothes if you have them hanging out on the line or anything like that. And I don't know if you're aware of it, you probably are, but the city already sold half of Riverside Park to Penford. It was Penford back in those days. Right next to where you are talking about now, adding the new project. All of those were not there. But I think it was maybe 40 years ago that they
56.
built that new thin boil plant, somebody called it, and things like that. And if you live across the street from there, you should have no property value change, I think. I don't know why you would have. And it's a clean operation. It is not a noisy operation. It is not a stinky operation like when the city turns over the compost down there by the windows from the southeast, and you live anywhere by the post office or any on the Czech Village area, you don't want to breathe deeply when you go outside.
So if the house next to you got torn down and a convenience store got put up, you don't believe that affects your property?
I didn't hear that.
If the house next door of yours got torn down...
If I could just
A
interrupt.
convenience store is a different thing. You have people going in and out of there all night long.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the intent is for questions and answers. Again, the ability, form your opinion so that if you have concerns, you can express them into the city council.
I also wanted to say, the part that you lose, the skate park, can be relocated. The ball diamond that is there now is a softball diamond with a very short left field. It's not really conducive to a good, honest softball game, unless you use big ball.
My kids enjoy it.
And before that, you had 2 baseball fields in Riverside Park, plus room for a playground equipment, a big pavilion there, monkey bars, and everything else, until the city filled it in to a depth of 10 or 12 feet to raise a level in there, because it was flooded every springtime.
Thank you very much for your comment. Yes, sir.
So based on your growth plan expectations, if you acquire Riverside Park, how long will that satisfy your needs? The property footprint that you...
The question is, if we're successful in acquiring Riverside Park, how long will that satisfy our needs? First part of that is to say, again, we don't have a project today. And I've shared in other meetings that if I walked out this door and there was a deal that I could sign off on, it would more than likely be at least a year before before we've done any and enough engineering work to satisfy Lynn County to get the construction permit. So the first project, no sooner than a year, and could be 3 or 4 years from now. So I think this acquisition, I mean, it's tough to predict a long way out in the future, but it's going to satisfy the growth of Penford for the next decade, at a minimum.
Do you have any ideas where you would go next?
Yeah.
So you're 10 years down the road.
10 years.
And,
So if you look at...
And things are going well, and bioproducts have continued to be a growth engine for your company.
So the question is, things are going wonderful. I'm hopefully retired because they are. And where does Penford go next? And there was the question that was raised last night, not so much as a question, but a statement by Linda Langston, who is a Lynn County supervisor. Because Lynn County is reinvesting back in the area, and they're looking at, where do they continue to grow the Lynn County campus. We think it's logical, to sit down with Lynn County and try to put together, the next plan of where things are going to go. The opportunity, you can look at a map, is more towards 380 probably into the future. But again, that's a decade out. I don't know, when it would be. But I can say that Linda Langston and I said, we think that's a good idea, to sit down and think about longer-term planning.
But rather than trying to do your expansion in a neighborhood where there are other variables to deal with, why not go to a business park somewhere else and do this piece of your business somewhere else?
Yeah, another good question. The question is, why not build the new bioprocessing plant in an industrial park somewhere else in the community? And the reason is, these partnerships want to partner with the corn wet milling industry so that they can align their facility directly next to it. The primary reason is, now I can just pump sugar right to the fermenters versus putting it in a truck and trucking it somewhere. It adds a lot of cost to the process, and then puts you at risk of being non-competitive.
You're going to considerable trouble and expense to, as I understand it, just to kind of hold your own. You're not going to take in any more, and you're not going to put out any more, so help me with your business plan here. Is that your goal, just to hold your own, or are you going to try to make more money?
Oh, well, good question. We talked about holding our own and whether that's going to make Penford a more profitable company. Our holding our own is on the total pounds. So let's just make a number up, for example. Today, Penford sells 100 million pounds of stuff. In the future, we're going to sell 100 million pounds of stuff. But that mix of the future 100 million pounds will be a much more profitable mix, because it'll contain more bioproducts, which are more profitable than ethanol. It'll contain food starches at a higher rate that are more profitable than industrial starches. So it's a shift in mix to a more profitable mix.
These 9 homes that say you purchase them all, what's going to happen? Are they sit there, you tear them down, what's going to happen to these?
Well, the question is, if we buy and are successful with the 9 homes, what is going to happen to them? 2 of the homes have not been repaired. We happen to own one, so we'll be taking it down here soon. The other one that hasn't repaired it, we'll probably take that down too. And as the gentleman in the back had mentioned, if there's interest in moving home, we own actually another home, and it's quite beautiful. It's a nice home. I think if there's better opportunities than to tear them down, we will certainly evaluate them.
Is there a process that's been established for how you put a price on relocating the park and moving the amenities? I mean, is there something that's already been established with either the City Council or the City Parks Division as to how you're going to quantify that number?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on what that is?
The question is, can I elaborate? John, you looking for the cost?
Got an idea. How are you going to establish what the cost will be to, you're saying at no cost to the citizens, to relocate the amenities at the park. So how do you approach that? What's being established? What is if there's numbers out there, what is that number that's been established?
Yeah. well, first, the process, but I'll skip to the end. If the city says it's a good idea to sell the park, you go through an RFQ process. Anyone can buy the park in this room. So from a number, I'm going to be a little hesitant, and I'm not going to share you the number that Penford is going to offer, because I don't want, we're at an auction in theory, right? And I don't want to give you my number. Our process, we sat down with the city, and as I shared in other meetings, I've been here for 18 years. I'm Cedar Rapids. I don't want Cedar Rapids to give away amenities and property. And that's what Penford is going to do. Our offer is going to be the fair market value of things. We're not asking for any incentives, not asking for tax rebates, not asking for any favors. Anything else? I almost got out of here. I thought I broke the record.
Penford and the park have a history side by side going back to 1903, as you probably, even before Penford or Douglas Starch. The park has had a lot of history associated with the Czech population in the neighborhood. It would certainly be my hope that Penford, if it would acquire the park and progress with redevelopment of it, would be in compliance with archaeological and historic surveys of the park to make sure that any historic record could be done to kind of document the changes happening to that site, to recognize the past history of what had been there.
Yeah, see a reason why not.
Yeah.
Sort of. The interesting thing about Penford, you go back in our annals, and I can't even pronounce the names that worked there because there's 1,000 Czechs. And I'm married to one too, and I can hardly say her last name.
One last question for you, Tim, then. With regard to, to what extent have you met with the city's the community planning committee, and they've got a plan called the Economic Development Investment Policy that deals with how you interface and fit into, you've talked about aesthetics of your plant, into the neighborhoods in which you reside. What meetings and what conversations have you had with that group within the city's planning, and how do you work that into your aesthetics plan?
John, the question is, have we Penford had any discussion with the?
I think it's called the community planning staff, the development staff, community development staff.
Yes. So community development, Christine Butterfield.
Yes.
Yeah, I've met with Christine Butterfield.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. Yes, sir.
What kind of jobs are we talking about? The 25 to 50. Is there,
Yeah. What kind of jobs? Again, in my presentation, I hopefully caught it. 25 to 50 jobs, manufacturing jobs. So those that may be familiar with Penford, pretty high rate, hourly rate, good benefit type of job. Engineers, research and development chemists, scientists, sales and marketing professionals. Well, it looks like, yes, sir.
One last thing. I am not an employee of Penford. I never have been. But one other thing, you finally touched on it here. They're not asking for any state help, local help, no TIF creation, where their taxes are being rebated for 20 years or something like the medical mall over there. And so I don't see where there is any problem with this. The aroma you talk about, downtown people, when the first announcement of this came out, were worried about the odor coming downtown. The prevailing winds are from the north and northwest most of the time, which is away from downtown, and regarding Penford's location. So if you can keep the compost aroma out of downtown, you've got it.
Thank you very much for your comment. I'll wrap it up then. Oh, I'm sorry.
Could the business that builds on this property be owned by a different company than Penford?
Good question. Could the business that's on this property be owned by a different company than Penford? We have not determined what the partnership would look like. So it'll be a partnership. Who the partner is, or is not identified at this time, or what the ownership structure will be. But as it came up in another meeting, regardless of who the partner is, They're strategically focused on green technologies. They're making products that are replacing petroleum. So you can think about the image that those companies have. Penford's been here for 115 years, and we want to stay in this town for another 115 years. The employees of Penford, this is our town. We want to do the right things for our community. So in the future, I think we're going to feel pretty comfortable with what we're doing on that location. Green technology, we're trying to make the environment a better place for all of us.
I guess I'll ask the question, what happens if somebody tells you no?
If somebody tells us no, it's going to make it more difficult for us. There's a question, I'll ask a question and answer one, right? Could you locate this process within your existing footprint? It's very difficult because we don't have a nice, even space, open space within our existing footprint. Companies must grow. They must evolve with change. One of the saddest things I read earlier this week, Kodak, one of America's icons, is ready to file bankruptcy because they didn't change with the times and grow. So that's what our growth strategy is about, changing with the times.
Could you be successful with your negotiations with the business partner if you simply had an option to purchase versus owning the property outright?
And that's really what we're talking about. And the question was an option to purchase the land. Now, I brought that up with city staff. Technically, an option gets complicated, but in concept of what we're doing is with this agreement that it's going to stay as a park until we have a project. It works like an option. It gives me the ability to take a park and say, all they have to do is let the city manager know that we got a project that's ready to go. This is the land.
How is that land currently, how is it currently zoned?
Oh,
And will that
I
immediately go into your tax basis?
OS.
OS. Office Services, is that what OS stands for? All right, so I'll wrap it up. I appreciate everybody taking the time. Again, you hear me say it, but I think it's a good thing for the community. It's jobs, tax base, it's the new amenities that people are desiring. We're going to do it in a manner that fits in with the local community. Thanks for your time. Enjoy the evening.